Hey loves, welcome back to the channel. I have 5 books today that I think you should read this fall. Although I am quite a summer baby, I live for the summer. I love the sun, I love the heat, I just love everything about the summer. However, there is just something about cozying up with a nice hot drink and a book in the autumn that just feels right. So here are some books that I read recently that I wish I had read in the fall in that exact scenario. I have some of them with me today, others I've gifted to friends, but starting with Coven, which I don't have with me unfortunately. I would say Coven was probably written for a younger audience, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. It is about a badass group of witches, specifically about this one girl, Lucky St. James, who is just kind of down on luck in her life. Her mother had passed away, so now she's living with her grandma, trying to make ends meet to try to take care of her and her grandma. One day she wanders into the basement of her grandma's apartment and she feels the pull towards this wardrobe, and when she opens it, she finds a silver spoon. Kind of weird, but she didn't really think much about it. But what she didn't know was that that spoon is the key to a whole different life that she probably could have never imagined that she could have. So soon after, she gets scouted for a new job, and when she goes to interview and explore the opportunity, she finds out that she is about to join a coven of witches who are literally out to smash the patriarchy. I kid you not, that is the theme of this book, and I absolutely loved it. So take that theme, mix it with the coolest, most badass women, and an adventure of a lifetime. Come on, you can't tell me that doesn't sound amazing. If you like a New York vibe, if you like an academia vibe, I would highly recommend reading Sirens and Muses by Antonia M. Gress. This book talks about two girls who attend this very prestigious art school in New York and who end up meeting in their class. Although they're from very different backgrounds, one girl is from the rich art world of New York and the other comes from the Midwest and lives a more modest life with her family. They develop a really interesting friendship and attraction to each other. As they're going through their academic journey, they just feel drawn to each other in a way that really neither of them were expecting. This book definitely has a sapphic theme, but really it's looking at like a coming of age story and a self-exploration story. And you get to follow these two girls as they leave art school, enter the art world in New York, and see how they flop or thrive in a very, very competitive industry. I would say this book is definitely for the vibes, but I do really enjoy how the author touches on these deep topics of self-exploration. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for me, and I feel like if you're usually into reading books around that setting and those topics, you would really enjoy it. I can't talk about books that make you feel cozy without talking about Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I found out about this book through TikTok, and I do sometimes have hesitations about taking recommendations from TikTok because I read Archer's Voice as a recommendation from TikTok and I absolutely hated it. I hated it so much. But this book was definitely a hit. It's got very, very simple writing because it was translated from Japanese, I believe. Before the Coffee Gets Cold talks about this cute little cafe in Japan tucked away in a back alley that is known for its magical properties. Legend says that when you go to this cafe, you're actually able to travel back in time, which is true, except that there's a bunch of rules that you need to follow to be able to travel back in time, and you would only be able to travel back in time if you've been at that cafe before. There's actually 3 or 4 books after this one, so it's become this amazing series, but this one talks about 4 different people who come to the cafe looking to go back in time to revisit some regrets in their life. It is touching. It made me cry. It made me smile. It made me feel all of the things. And honestly, I feel like in the fall time, I just want to feel all the things. I want to have a good cry, I want to have a good laugh, and then I want to get on with my day. Technically, it is a book with 4 short stories, but they're all tied together by the cafe, and the characters actually have relationships with each other. So it felt like a complete story and not just like a series of 4 short stories. You really just grow to love every single character. Even the ones that you didn't love in the beginning, they have an amazing character arc. I honestly will never stop recommending this book. I personally just loved it so much, and it's one of my #1 cozy reads. When I was growing up, we would refer to the fall time as cuffing season because you have the summer to live your hot girl summer and have fun, and then you slowly enter fall where it gets a little colder and you just get a little bit more sentimental and wanting connection. Halloween hits, you have a blast, and then typically by wintertime, people are starting to get into relationships because who doesn't want somebody to share Christmas with? I think for that reason, I personally really like reading love stories or just stories about relationships in the fall and winter as well. And although this next book isn't necessarily one that has an amazing typical happy ending, I still absolutely loved it. And the book is Ghosts by Dolly Alderton. The love that I have for Dolly is crazy. Let me know if you feel the same, if you've read any Dolly books, but she's the type of writer for me that feels like I'm reading my own diary or I'm just having a conversation with a friend over coffee. She has this very unique skill of making you feel like it is the most relatable and familiar and connection-driven writing, even if the specific scenarios that she talks about aren't relatable to your life. Ghost talks all about dating in your 30s and what that looks like. Dating in your 20s is hard enough, but once you enter your 30s, you have way different standards, you value different things, and your whole idea about what you want from love and what you want from relationships just changes. As the book title describes, it really talks about what it means and what it feels like to get ghosted in your 30s. Does it bring up past traumas? Does it trigger you? I love reading books about this. Pretty much as any self-exploration themed book, no matter what format it's written in, I always have an interest in. Although I'm not quite yet in my 30s, I didn't feel like the age of the character really affected the relatability of the book to me and my life. So I think that if you have just dated and experienced dating in the last like 10 years, this book is going to be a really fun, funny, and intriguing read for you. The last book is actually one that I read most recently, and it's I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This was actually a book that I found through social media. I don't remember the exact creators that had recommended it, but I felt like so many of the book creators that I personally loved and related to had talked about loving this book. I really wasn't expecting this book to be kind of this like dystopian sci-fi sort of book, but that really is what it's about. It's about 40 women who find themselves locked up in a cage, essentially, underground that's guarded by guards. The guards don't talk to them, they only give them a small amount of food, and because they're underground and their time is being controlled by the guards or whoever has decided what's going to happen in this cage, they have no idea what time it is, they have no idea what day it is, and they just kind of have to live out the rest of their lives inside of this cage. However, there is one woman who's a bit of a unique case because all the other women were brought into the cage at some point in their lives, so they were taken as teens or adults. But when they were taken, a young girl, I think like an infant or a toddler, was taken, and so she really never knew a life outside of being in this cage. Because of that, she feels quite isolated and feels like she has a very different experience than the other women, and quite often find herself feeling left out. However, because she has this difference in thinking, she ends up being quite a useful resource for the women in helping them trying to figure out, okay, what could actually be going on here? One day, in the middle of what seems like a very routine day for them, an alarm starts blaring and the guards suddenly disappear. That young girl then is able to help the women escape the cage, and then the rest of the book really dives into them re-entering a world that they're no longer familiar with and trying to start anew. I'm gonna leave it there so you can go and find out what happens in the rest of the book yourself. This book really surprised me, both in the themes and topics, but in the way that it was written and in the way that it ended up being a dystopian book as well. I definitely understand why so many people loved this, and if you haven't read it, it is a super short book, so definitely check this out in the autumn. Okay, I do have a bonus book that I want to share that I actually haven't finished yet, but I've been slowly making my way through it, and it is Women Who Run with the Wolves. I initially was recommended this book by my friend Summer, who found out that apparently Julia Fox absolutely loves this book. So I was like, okay, cool. She seems like a badass independent woman. And then Madeline RG talked about this book in her podcast, and then I heard about it in another YouTube video as well. And I was like, okay, amazing. I already had the book, so I decided to get back into it and try to read more. And oh my gosh, I don't know what I was expecting from this book, but I wasn't expecting it to make me feel such raw and guttural feelings about being a woman and being feminine and being wild. Essentially, Clarissa Pinkola Estes talks about this wild woman archetype, which is truly the way that women are supposed to be, as in the way that women are naturally supposed to be versus what society has trained us to be. I haven't gotten very far. I have read 50 pages, but already I can tell that this book is going to make a pretty dramatic impact on my life. So she alternates between her kind of explaining to you this wild woman archetype and what it really means to live true to that archetype, and also fables and myths and fairy tales that really support that idea. Back in the day, the way that history and stories were passed on was verbally. So your great grandma would tell her daughter a story, who would tell her daughter a story, and it would get passed on and on and on throughout time. And so I think it starts to explore how, okay, if we have some of these like myths and fables and fairy tales about the woman and what she's meant to be, how can we necessarily say that they aren't true? I kind of really like that idea because for me, there's just something magical about the magical world or the spiritual world where it's like, okay, how can we genuinely prove that it doesn't exist, right? Am I right? Or am I just a Harry Potter fan? I don't know. But I do really like how she kind of weaves these stories with her own opinions, as well as some science/psychology, and I think all in all, it just makes you think about what it means to be a woman in today's day and age, and what we could do to live a more fulfilled and safe and secure life. Those are some book recommendations that I have for this fall and autumn season. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if you have other suggestions for me, please let me know as well, because I'm always looking for new books to read. If you enjoyed this video and you like to read lit fic books, check out this video next, where I go over some of my favorite literary fiction books of all time. It would help me a lot if you hit the subscribe button, left a comment, or liked this video, because it'll help this channel grow. But I hope you have an amazing day wherever you are in the world, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!